Hello friends, welcome back to GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm the GM Philosopher. Today we are talking about how to build a personal, class-specific character story arc for your monk players. For players specifically playing the monk class, I'm showing you this video for two different reasons. Number one, I'm going to show you my process for how I improvise and build these class-specific plot arcs, basically on the fly as I go, using my 8-step player character arc framework. I'm also literally going to build one in this video, which you can grab or even grab elements of and plug into your own campaign. So it serves a dual purpose. I'm going through all of the classes. You can find the playlist here. We've done the bard, we've done the cleric, we've done the fighter, we've done several other classes, and we have arrived at the monk. I'm going through them in alphabetical order. So it's time to get into this. Let's dive in. I'm going to be going through my 8-step player character arc framework though, and if you want to download this, you'll find the link is in the description. You can download this document just from a Google Drive. It's free, and if you download that while you go through this video and kind of read it as I go through this, you're going to understand a lot better what I'm doing. I am going to tell you the 8 steps as I go, but if you kind of read through the document, you're going to be able to see exactly and more clearly what I'm doing. So go ahead and download that. It'll really help as we go through this video for you to stay on track. All right, with that being said, let's talk about step number 1, initial point of contact. This is where you introduce the arc subject in a meaningful or intriguing way. So what is this? The arc subject is kind of the subject of the arc. It's kind of the thing that comes into the player's frame of vision that appeals to them, that gets them to buy in, to bite on your character arc. I will often throw these out willy-nilly, all the time. I'm actually in a habit of throwing these out at my players all the time. But you'll know you have real magic when one of them sticks. How do you know it's going to stick? If a player character actually shows interest in it, pursues it, and quote unquote bites on it, like dangling the carrot and they bite, like the cartoons with the donkey. So they bite on it, and that's how you know, we have it. This is something this player character is interested in. Now I know I should develop this plot arc, okay? I don't usually plan out plot arcs in advance until I've gotten the player character to bite on the initial point of contact. Why? Because you never know what player characters are going to like. And if you spend too much time prepping a plot arc before your characters have actually bid into it, before they've actually bought into it, then you might be tempted to railroad them down that. And no one likes that, right? No one's here for a railroad. We're here for a good game of D&D. We're here for some player-driven story narratives that the players care about. And I'm going to tell you one example of what I would throw out there for a monk. And I'm telling you this has a really good chance of getting the player to buy in on it, okay? Now, in every monk's backstory, nearly every monk, 98% of monks are going to have something in their backstory about, they went to a monastery and they trained, or they went to the secret order of monks and they became a master. Maybe they went to a temple and they meditated and they trained in the martial arts, right? So, or they went to a secret order or a cult and they trained. So there's going to be some kind of like monastic, sort of like temple or monastery religion driven element to the training they went through to become this like martial artist, this monk character. Now, this isn't always the case, but usually, I'm telling you, 98% of the time, this is the case. I love to take elements from the backstory and use them in the initial point of contact. So here's what I'm going to do for the monk character. At some point, when the player characters arrive in a village or a city or something like that, the monk, who is probably going to look a little distinctive. This is another thing about monks. They tend to dress in a monk-like fashion. You'll notice this. They tend to wear maybe like the robes, or maybe they're dressed, in a more minimalist fashion. Maybe they're dressed like a Shaolin monk. Maybe they're dressed kind of like a Jedi. Monks, people who play monks tend to kind of dress their characters in a manner that suggests they are different than the others. They're maybe monk-like. They are maybe the kind of characters that when NPCs look at them, the NPCs might be able to readily conclude, this person, they're different. They're trained by a certain order, or maybe they stand out from the crowd. They're not living this consumerist lifestyle. They're living this like minimalist lifestyle, whatever, right? But there are telltale signs. So I'm going to pick up on that. And when the monk comes into this village or town, they are basically going to say, are you from, and then they're going to spout out an order or something. And it's going to be literally that monk's order. Whether or not, and even better if not, but whether or not there was any reason for them to even suspect that, right? So it's almost like, wait a minute, the monk might think, how would you know? Like, I don't have any symbols, I didn't tell anyone about this. And then they'll quickly learn upon asking the NPCs who say this and be like, because one of your fellow monastic brothers or sisters is in town. They've actually gone to the local dojo and they're challenging the master in a duel to the death tonight at midnight. And we assumed you were a part of that group because we never see people who look like you in our village. We're just a common little trading village. Or if it's a big city, it's like we never see people like you in our neighborhood or whatever, right? It's like, but everyone is like planning to attend. It's going to happen at the dojo. It's going to be, and then they're going to drop the name of that monk's order or monastic practice or religion or cult or whatever it is, wherever they trained. And then they're going to give the name of the person. Okay. And we're going to call this the antagonist. So the actual initial point of contact is kind of a rumor, but the real point of contact is the antagonist, which is someone that they trained with when they were young. And whenever this gets dropped, I'm going to go into this triggering like a flashback, a memory. Now, this leads us to step number 2, which is emotional attachment, seed the bond, design moments that evoke curiosity, empathy, admiration, or wonder. So whenever this monk character hears, oh, so-and-so who went to your monastic order is challenging the local dojo of the local, martial arts school or whatever. Like we're making this like a kung fu movie arc, okay? So it's like whenever they hear about this, we're going to go to a flashback and I'm going to say to the monk, all right, so here's the thing. You've been told this person trained with you, or, whether or not they trained with you or trained in your same order or whatever, I don't know 100% your backstory, but you hear a name that you recognize, and you recognize and associate this name of belonging to someone you did know, or someone you met, or someone you had some kind of contact with while you were training as a young child. Or I would go back pretty young, the youngest their backstory allows. And then I would give them the name of the character, the antagonist monk, we're going to call it, because they're another martial artist, another monk. And I'm going to say, now, I do not know the details 100% of their backstory, right? This probably wasn't in their backstory. We're just taking elements from their backstory. It's like, but I want to challenge them. So I'm going to say to them, you recognize this name as someone you met, someone you knew about, someone you encountered in some form or fashion, and you knew them as a bully. You saw it, you knew it, a bully from your past. They may have bullied you, or you may have seen it happen to other people. This is what you remember. When you hear this name, you haven't heard this name for probably years and years and years, but now you hear it and it comes back. Share with us this memory, right? So I'm challenging the player character to come up with this memory. So we're creating their backstory, or at least addendums to it, like additions in real time as we go through this. I've done this on multiple occasions. This works so well because what you're doing is you're inviting the player to create backstory for their character, which creates emotional meaning, it creates depth, and it creates higher stakes. And they're going to treat it as more important because they are creating part of it, right? So I'm going to say, I might even say, tell us what you remember about this character. And then above table, I'll say, this is basically an invitation to create this because this person dropped this name and I'm telling you that you recognize it, but I don't know your character's background enough to know the circumstance. So their species, what they look like, what they were like, what their personality was like. Keep in mind, I don't have any idea. I'm creating this on the fly. I have literally not thought past this. So it's what the player character decides, and that's going to dictate what they find if they go investigate this. And I'm also going to add into there some emotional stakes. We're going to raise the stakes, in fact. And this brings us into step 3, conflict, disrupt the harmony, introduce challenge, ambiguity, or threat. I'm going to say, that this person, because they went to your order, they're very skilled. That they're probably going to demolish this local dojo master, all the younglings, all the kids, all the people who are trying to better themselves, trying to find a better life through this monastic order in the way that you did. That this person is going to come in and just crush it, crush their spirits, crush their hopes, crush their dreams, probably oppress this local dojo to just a hopeless, oppressive, tyrannical power. So basically inviting the player to help create this, already kind of setting the stage for it, right? We know what's going on. We know that this monk is likely going to go investigate, and it's probably going to set the stage for like a kung fu match of some kind or some kind of deeper thing. I don't know yet because I'm just creating this as I go, and we already have some seeds of conflict built into this, okay? Now, step 4 is drama. That's going to come next. But before we dive into step 4, we want the player to create as much as they're willing, as much as they can, as much as they're interested in. And then we as a game master, we're going to fill in the details. And I'll even say above table, I have this conversation with my players. I'll be like, are you okay with me filling in some details? Like, around what you've just said? And they will probably say, yeah, go for it. So then I'm going to fill in those details and then we're going to be fleshing this out. Okay. So the next step is going to be the drama push pull. Okay, we're going to get into that in just a minute, but before we do that, I just want to remind you I have a free ebook that I offer. It's called the 10-Minute GM Mastery Kit. This is the book that packs 20 plus years of gaming wisdom into the 10 most important lessons I've learned running games into a concise 10-minute read, this helps me to further the goal of this channel, which is to empower game masters to run better games. So make sure that you grab that. Link's in the description. It's free. You cannot go wrong. Get added to my email mailing list when you download that. I send out emails about cool stuff sometimes, so you're not going to want to miss it. All right, now let's dive into what this exactly means. Now, it occurs to me that as I'm going through this, I'm not giving you many details. I'm not sharing with you, literally the watcher of this video, very many details about this villain, about the situation. And here's why. It's because I want all of the key details to be spawned from what the player helps you to create in the flashback of their backstory. So that's why I'm not giving you any key specific details here, because they're not needed for this. Part of the magic of this specific class plot arc idea is that the player helps you to create that. And that's where the magic comes from, okay? However, we can go into the drama, which is the push-pull, step number 4, okay? And I can explain this to you without needing the details. Deepen emotional complexity through shifting trust and doubt. So here's what's gonna happen. At some point, the group is probably gonna go either investigate or visit or pay a visit to or whatever this, this villain or the local dojo or whatever, okay? And they're probably gonna go to both places. And what they're gonna realize is that right across the street from the dojo, there's this group of monks who are basically disciples of their leader, who is our primary antagonist, the bully from the monk's past, the player character monk's past. And they're set up across the road, and they're kind of maintaining a rigid, stony silence. But they do have one herald who is calling out. And they're calling out elements from basically what sounds like an extremist viewpoint of the beliefs of the monastic order that the monk was affiliated with. So they'll, be saying things like, "Hear ye, hearken unto yourselves, what you have become, you slothful, arrogant city-goers. You do not understand that your repugnant, soulless, gluttonous lifestyles perpetuate the destruction of the world. The only salvation is through the beliefs of," and we'll call it the Order of the Golden Leaf, or whatever their order is, right? So what we're realizing is that this monk doesn't any longer represent the ideals of the original monastic order. They've created their own cult-like group that's an offshoot that is very extremist in their views. And the extremist views you want to extrapolate from the views of the monastic order. So let's say a typical monastic order might say, they might believe in something like, become your best physically. Learn to be a warrior so that you can defend the innocent, uphold justice, uphold law, and also protect those you care about. You do this by learning the ways of Kung Fu. You do this by becoming very physically adept, getting in shape, working out. You eat a very strict diet. You attend the monastic order to right yourself spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. And then through the tenets of our monastic order, you learn to be a warrior, needing no weapons, needing no glamour, no gold, no armor, only your fists and your ironclad constitution to become a warrior of the people, a warrior of our ideals, right? That's kind of a generic template for what a monastic order is. So what you want to do is you want to kind of take the details of that order, take them to the utmost extreme, right? The utmost extreme. And then you create a cult-like version of it. And that's what we're creating here. And once again, I don't know the details, but I'm kind of going with just the generic template. So where do we take that to? We go from being better yourself, become physically fit, learn the ways of Kung Fu, fight to defend law and justice and order. And we're taking this to anyone who does not do this is a glutton and a sloth and a sinner, and they're actually deserving of punishment. And we deliver punishment to those who don't have the self-discipline to become their best selves. Because to not become your best self renders you a disease upon this world. And we are here to cure the world of the disease of the gluttonous and the slothful, right? So you could take it to an extreme like that, right? And as we all know, when you take things to extremes, business generally gets dirty, because when you take things to extremes, extreme, if you take them to the utmost extremity, usually they get ridiculous and they start to point at victimizing people in a very pointed and extreme fashion, okay? So that's what we're going to say is happening with the Order of the Golden Leaf here. But now there comes a question. How are we going to create drama, push, and pull with this situation? So here's how I would do it. When the player characters, which I can almost guarantee they're going to do this, but at some point when they approach or confront this group of monks, we're going to have the leader, the bully, the antagonist, come forward and greet them. And the leader is going to be very charismatic, as cult leaders usually are. Very charismatic, very confident, very sure of themselves. But they're going to be edgy, right? And they're going to present themselves like someone who really has their business on lockdown, who really knows themselves. And I'm going to tell you what, one of the best examples of a character like this that I've seen in modern times in like cinema would be Bane from the Dark Knight Rises trilogy, like the movies where Christian Bale played Batman. Bane, the character played by Tom Hardy, is a really great example of this type of character. They are incredibly confident, incredibly sure of themselves, perhaps even narcissistic, but they are also very charismatic. And when they speak, you can't help but to believe that they're speaking the truth, right? So that's how I'd roleplay this kind of like leader, this monk antagonist. And then I would identify which member of the group is most likely, like as a GM, I'm going to pull myself out of the game and I'm going to just think psychologically, which member of my group is most likely to identify and kind of like this leader, and then which one is most likely to really hate this kind of leader. And I'm going to make some assumptions about that. And then this person is going to walk up to all the player characters and he's just going to, he or she, I don't know if it's a he or she because this is all set when the player, the monk, because this is their arc, they kind of say what they remember from the flashback of the past. So I'm going to have this person strut up to the group and they're going to kind of walk around and be like, you have found yourselves some very capable looking compatriots here. The question is, do they know about you? Do they know how you struggled? Do they know how you, despite being the golden boy of the class or the golden girl of the class, had dark secrets of your own? And then they're going to walk up to the player character who I think outside of the monk is most likely to agree with them. And they're going to look at them and say, I have a feeling about you. You are not the type of person to dally about in nonsense, are you? You're the type who likes action. You like your facts, true and straight. You don't like lies, do you? Right. I'm just going to say things that I think will appeal to that player's character. And then I'm going to have them go to the player character who like probably least would be likely to like them, right? And they're going to say things like, you though, you're the weak link, aren't you? Trouble. See, this was always their problem, and they're going to point to the monk. While they took their training serious to a point, they lacked one thing. And then they're going to turn to look at the monk and say, leadership, structure, true discipline of the mind. Always thinking about things besides the mission, right? So we're going to seed some drama here. And what I'm kind of hoping is that maybe I can get one of the player characters to kind of buy in, because I'm not going to like label. I'm not, as a game master, labeling this person, this antagonist, is anything other than a bully from this person's past, but we don't know what they've become now, right? And I kind of want to try to sow a little discord. Maybe if I can get one player character to kind of like them a little bit, and then one player character to really hate them, that'll create a little interesting drama. I've had a lot of really good like experiences creating this kind of drama in these things. And then we have development and revelation. Arc subject evolves, which is step number 5. And for this, I want to go back to a flashback. So when this antagonist says to the monk, they don't know about your past, about the skeletons in your closet, do they? You haven't told them what you've done. Right? I want to go back and I want to say to the monk out of game, above table. I'm going to say, okay, above table. Now, we're going to go to another flashback. Your character doubtlessly had, wins and losses during your training. You had ups and downs. You had things that you were proud of and things that you're not proud of. What I would like to explore in your own mind, and other player characters, take note, this is not in-game knowledge. This is only in the mind of our monk. But I would like you to share what pops to mind when this character says this. I don't know your backstory so intimately enough that I know your darkest secrets, but what would you say is one of, maybe not the darkest secret, but one of the darkest secrets your character might be holding? Maybe a regret, maybe a failure of some kind, maybe a secret from their past that this character, because you trained together, would know about. And here we go again. We're going to get the player character to seed more information about their backstory, tie it in with the present situation. And that's going to give us so much depth. And if we're lucky, it's going to be bad enough, dark enough. And this is interesting because we're pitting the storytelling ability of the player playing the monk against the player who we've targeted as trying to get them to favor this person. Because if they do a good enough job, if the monk does a good enough job of describing this, then the player piloting the person we've targeted to favor the antagonist will get a little bit of a, oh, well, I don't know if I blame this antagonist monk for thinking you're weak or whatever, right? That's what we're so that we've seeded this and we're trying to create a little drama. Now, here's the thing. You might create a lot of drama or you might create a little bit or you might not create much at all, whatever. But The point is 1% more than you had before this player created is better than 0. So every little bit helps. If you can seed the seeds of this, they will likely sprout, and they may grow to high lengths, or they may just become little, but even a little bit of drama is better than nothing. But that's where we get our, step 5, development and revelation. Arc subject evolves. Let the arc subject gain depth, change, or reveal something new. So what the new thing is literally a creation of the monk themselves, describing what this antagonist is talking about. Now, for the sake of this, obviously we have this fight coming up at midnight, and we don't know how this is going to resolve itself. We don't know if the player character is going to be more inclined to let this happen. I could also see this monk wanting to kind of volunteer to fight the antagonist in the stead of the dojo leader. We don't know how this is going to go. So let's just assume the most likely scenario. I think that if you can manage to get under the skin of the monk enough, then the most likely scenario is going to be that they're going to want to fight instead of the dojo leader. Okay. If you don't really do a great job getting under the skin, the likely result is that the player character is going to be like, we don't care, and we're walking away from this. Middle of the line is they're at least going to go to the fight and watch it. Okay. So we have here, though, step number 6, lesson, new information. Reveal a truth that reframes everything. At some point here, I want to cut to a little boy or a little girl in training. And when I say little boy or little girl, I want to kind of mirror the player character, the monk. So, if they're a girl character, if they're a boy character, whatever, I kind of want this NPC that I'm about to introduce to kind of remind them of themselves. And that's like the descriptor. And I want them to notice maybe some kids out in the front training, and then how this monk might, the antagonist monk might point out, look at them, those poor youth training under a weak leader. They have so much potential. Underneath the right leadership, they would flourish, become warriors of good, of discipline. But under that weakling, they're going to become soft, apathetic, like you. And he's going to shove a finger into the monk player's chest and say, you're apathetic, aren't you? You've lost your edge. And then laugh, as if this is just a joke. This monk player and their friends is a joke. This antagonist monk is going to conquer this school and subjugate everyone. This village or this section of the city is going to become their playground because they're that powerful and they know it. Okay, so, but I want to kind of try to tie in these kids training and, seeing an NPC, and I want to somehow invite them into a conversation with one of the youngsters. And the youngsters is going to say, what's going on? What's going on? I don't understand. My master says not to worry, but is he going to fight that guy or that girl? And then point across the street and look at the antagonist monk, right? And this is the step 6 lesson, new information. Okay, reveal truth that reframes everything. And then the player character monk, is going to say what they're going to say, whatever, probably something like, yeah, they're going to fight him. And then the boy or the girl is going to say, I don't think my master can win. My master's elderly, old. They haven't fought in a war in a long time. Look at that strong person. Oh no, what's going to happen? My whole life has revolved around this place. What's going to happen when someone new takes control? And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to get an emotional pull, trying to get this monk to care more, or maybe even another player character, but this is the monk's personal plot arc, right? And if we do this right, this leads us right into step 7, emotional attachment reinforcement, right? Bring the bond back to center stage, but now matured or at risk. So the bond, what is the bond? Well, the bond is the monastic order. It is the goodness or the lawfulness or the discipline or the ideology of the monastic order. And we have this antagonist monk who's threatening it, taking it to an extreme, going to oppress these young people who are training in the order. And this monk is left with a moral dilemma. Do I intercede or do I just walk away? We want to increase the emotional stakes to a point where the monk literally is going to be compelled to want to get involved. And then, of course, this leads to step 8, climactic conflict, moment of truth. Now, I'm going to be the first to say there are a lot of ways this could go down. The party might decide to attack. They might decide to go to the fight, and then after the fight, they decide what's going to happen, or, there's all kinds of things that could happen. But what I want to play into is that emotional pull, and that we have to do something. And that something is ultimately going to have to be some kind of combat, because they're facing a militaristic, extremist branch of monks who are very martially proficient. And in fact, you can even throw little things in there about maybe some of the monks or disciples might throw eyes at the other player characters. Maybe you have a player character who's a druid, and then one of the monk disciples says, I see, you're one of those nature folk. The ones who weren't disciplined enough to actually show up on time. So you just went out in the woods and took a nap? That's your superpower? Weak. Right? So we were trying to goad them into this. And we want to make it to where it's going to be really difficult to resist emotionally and psychologically, right? But the real pull should be this monk antagonist with this monk player. And I'm going to keep going back to that. In your mind's eye, you see them. You remember them bullying, right? We're using details from the backstory, so I can't give you specific details, but we want to make a note, the top 4 most evocative memories that player gives us, and we want to use them and use them and use them. Use them 4 times in the same session if you need to, a flashback. Every time they hear this monk talk, when they hear this little boy or little girl talk, when they go and interview the older, the dojo of the school who's maybe older, and the monk realizes right away they can't win this fight. They can't win it. They're going to die. They're literally going to die. They are not trained in the way that our order was trained. We are elite. This is more like a recreational facility. This frames it in a very emotionally compelling light, and it's going to compel a conflict. And that's where I would lead it. And so, that's where I would take it. Now, with that being said, I will admit I'm light on details on this one, but here's the overarching principle, is that we want to leverage the player's creativity and then put those in here. And it's going to cause us to put in a lot of improvisation, but the skeleton, the bones, the cornerstones of the story are already embedded in, and you can take this and use it in your campaign. This also shows you how I might take backstory and leverage it improvisationally into creating a personal character arc for a character. Now, if you want to know more about how to emotionally resonate with your player characters and create stories that transcend just a gaming experience, take your TTRPGs to the next level, I do have a book, The Ultimate Guide to TTRPG Mastery. In this book, I go through 50 pages of dissertation, my own process I've learned over 20 plus years of gaming to run games that transcend just being a game. So link is in the description. Purchase that if you want to kind of know how I run these things, how I conceptualize these things. This is the basics of my teaching. I believe this book is going to go down in history as one of the most important books in the TTRPG space. I don't think anyone's really talking about transcendence of TTRPGs like I am, and I would encourage you to buy this book and read it if you really want to take your games to the next level. But the point is we want to leverage a backstory. We want to bring something from the monk's past, and we will put it in the present, and then emotionally evoke that monk and basically be like, we're challenging your principles, we're challenging your ideals. This is coming from the antagonist. We're challenging everything you believe in. Are you monk enough to stand up to it? And then the answer is, I'm telling you 97.5% of the time, the answer is going to be yes. And then you're going to have an incredible personal plot arc. And if you can let that monk have that battle and then shine in the span of it, and then evoke the other player characters too with the disciples, and you can jab at them emotionally from the disciples talking smack or whatever it is. You can come up with a wildly compelling plot arc that's really going to hit where it hurts, and then when the player characters win, they're going to feel really, really good about it. If this video has helped you, if it's appealed to you, if you enjoy my channel, I would also encourage you to help me. I'm making a sincere and energetic effort to improve my channel, to raise the stakes, to make this channel even better than it's ever been. So if you want to support me, you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. That would really be helpful. At least fuel me with caffeine for my next video. And I also invite you to join our Discord. Links in the description. It's free. You can join that and join over 500 GMs in our community talking about running games, sharing GM tips, etc. It's awesome. I invite you to take part in that with us. And with that being said, that's going to be it for this one. Thank you so much for coming back for another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. Empowering game masters to run better games is the goal here. So smash that subscribe button, smash that thumbs up button, and I will see you awesome people on the next one.